So Stephan is the founder and CEO of YouGov, is that right?
Yeah, right.
And YouGov is probably the premier internet-based polling, political and other polling companies in the world. Good characterization?
It is. We were the first, we're not the first to do internet market research, but we were the first to do internet polling in a way that gave accurate results. We've been doing it now for 11 years. We have the strongest record of accuracy of any pollster around. We came top of the Huffington Post league table after the last American elections. That's across all the stateside seats and everything. We have the best record in the UK, and just a few weeks ago we got the Danish elections precisely right with 0 error. I only say that because I would like to share some new polling results with you, and I want you to at least think that they may be accurate.
Let me just stop you. I'm going to let you go for 10 minutes or so. We'll do that. Then we're going to take questions, and again, we've got a microphone here for the people who ask questions because we want to make sure it gets into the internet sphere. So you go as long as you want, and I'll come back and rescue you. Thank you.
So I was just going to share with you some new results. In fact, the first ones on the Euro crisis are not going to come out until tomorrow. I have a little bit on the American elections and something on the Arab Spring as well. Make a couple of reflections on those, and then we can, I hope, discuss the relevance of polling and market research in social media as well. So very quickly, for News International, we have a poll coming out tomorrow, which is across 4 countries on the Euro crisis. We asked in 4 different countries, Denmark, France, Germany, and the UK, whether or not the Eurozone should spend on bailing out Greece. No big surprise, 3 countries were strongly against it. The most against it were Germany, at 2-1. After all, they have the most to spend as well. But the one country that was in favor of increased spending was Denmark. Denmark turns out to be quite a good neighbor to the Greeks. Throughout this poll, they were the most positive. Only Denmark thought that Greece should be allowed to stay in the euro. The other 3 countries were strongly against Greece being allowed to stay in the euro. This is polling done 2 days ago, by the way. We also asked whether it was actually important to keep the euro going, whether the collapse of the euro would be a bad thing. Universally, very strong feelings that the euro collapse would be a bad thing. And so there seems to be some contradiction about a willingness to pay for it to bail out the countries that are failing. It seems from this that people think that the euro should shrink, the eurozone should shrink, not to include the failing countries. We finally asked in this poll which leaders were the most trusted. We asked them to rate their trust for each of the 5 leaders that we looked at: Sarkozy, Papandreou, Angela Merkel, of course, Cameron, and Berlusconi. No surprises there, but interesting that Berlusconi was as untrusted as Papandreou, right at the bottom, very little support at all. Angela Merkel, very strongly trusted in all 4 countries, came out on top. Sarkozy and Cameron in the middle there, pretty much trusted and untrusted to the same degree. Going to another area, the US elections, it's far too early to decide, to find out who is going to win anything. At the moment, we have in our polling for The Economist, Mitt Romney just 3 points ahead of Kane, but it is very early, it's very close. I think that's quite meaningless. The only figure that I do want to give you, and this is a poll that we did a few months ago and has been repeated recently, the same numbers apply. It's been described as the chart, as the graph. If I had the graph in front of you, I'll describe it as the graph that explains American politics. Because we asked, would you vote for a candidate who prefers to compromise, or a candidate that goes all out in a principled way for what he or she believes? And it was about 50-50. People split fairly evenly. But what was interesting was when we took the breaks and looked at Democratic supporters and Republican supporters, Democratic supporters were 2-1 in favor of a compromise candidate, a candidate that would go out to compromise, whereas Republicans were 2-1 in favor of the all-out, don't compromise candidate. And that tells you a lot, not only about the nature of the debate in America, but also the difficulty of choosing a candidate, of course, who appeals to the people that want an uncompromising candidate, who then has to win over people that want a compromised candidate. So what we had was a complete mirror image, that the Republicans and the Democrats were the exact opposites to each other, one preferring compromise, the other preferring no compromise. Finally, just quick, some results from across the Middle East, where we also poll. We did a poll, this is a poll for Cambridge University, and we found that there is continuing strong support and broad support, even across all the countries that we polled in, for the Arab Spring. But very important, this is all about economic freedom and not about liberty or liberalism. In fact, the slightly disappointing from a Western point of view, is that in fact the people that are most keen on change are people that also want the laws to reflect religion, that are in favor of punishments for people who leave Islam, a majority approving of the death penalty for people who leave Islam, and that the strongest anti-Western feeling is amongst the young. So when we look at the Arab Spring, we're obviously glad of the toppling of dictators, but it is perhaps slightly worrying that the motivation here is not what we would think Western liberalism and liberty, but rather different forces, including, though, economic freedoms. Corruption is seen as the biggest issue across the region. Those are three different types of polls. And I just want to reflect a little bit on the differences in these polls and their value as a segue into talking about social media and what we can look forward to in polling in this area. Because the first of the polls I gave you was a pure snapshot poll. It tells you what people are thinking now. They may think something very different in 3 weeks' time when the situation changes. And I would argue that interesting and important though these polls are, they are actually can be quite misleading. They tell us what people will answer to a particular question, but very often the question is one that most people haven't considered. Only a few months ago, or about a year ago, we were polling on the AV referendum in Britain. We had a big referendum on changing the voting system. And all the polls showed that everybody wanted a change, a huge positive vote for changing the voting system. We, however, were out of kilter. We did something called a deliberative poll, where we asked people a question at the beginning, then we put arguments for and against the proposition, and asked them at the end again, and found that, this is predictive in some ways, because if it moves one way or the other, it tends to tell you which way things will go after a debate. And we found a strong swing against the AV system, against change. And we predicted about a year ago that there'd be a strong no in the AV referendum, and all the other polls, the snapshot polls, were saying there'd be a yes. It turns out there was, in fact, a strong no. And I think it shows you the limitation of doing snapshot polls about subjects that people don't really know much about, which they may learn about more later, that it can be misleading. Whereas the other two polls, the ones about underlying attitudes, I think tell us much more that helps us to predict what might happen in the future. And I think that the value of polling is not just the immediate snapshot that gets a headline in a newspaper, but it is this underlying polling, which is why YouGov has teamed up with Cambridge University to create an Institute for Public Opinion Research to be able to do and inject into the media a more deliberative kind of polling. I want to just raise one issue, and then we can have a conversation about market research and online polling. And that is the potential that's offered by social media. Because if I'm looking for a deeper understanding of the dynamics of public opinion and going beyond snapshot polling, then obviously I must look at social media as a way of doing that, because I've got the whole social graph that I can potentially look at. Companies like Facebook and Twitter and those that use their feeds that are able to access their data are obviously going to be very interested to see how you can get more deep information and how we can model the populations from that. And there's huge excitement about what this social media information, this data, can actually tell us. It's thought to be much better than traditional polling because you're not simply asking people questions, you're listening to what they're actually saying. But I have to introduce a very strong note of caution. Although we, like all other companies, are looking at how we can make sense out of that sort of data. The fact is, for all the claims that have been made, I don't believe a single testable prediction has ever been successful out of social media. It is very often that reverse engineered, we get great predictions. For example, I read a wonderful paper showing that you could have told that Boris Johnson, who was running for mayor of London against Ken Livingstone, you could tell from the search analytics of Google that he was going to win. In fact, all the pollsters except YouGov said that Ken Livingstone would win. We said he'd win by 6%. He won by 6%. But to then be told 6 months later, when someone looks back over the data and says you could have told, you could have known from the analytics that, that Livingstone would win, is, I think, very misleading. And that has been all the research so far that I have seen that then goes back over past results and looks at how you can reverse engineer correct predictions out of existing data. I don't know if anyone in the audience knows any examples where social media data has correctly predicted something in advance, not reverse engineered later. This is the big question. I think this is something I'd love to explore with you. You are more expert in social media than I am, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we can do to understand what's going on in social media using opinion polling and how the two things can be joined together. So, Spencer,
okay,
I'd like to turn it
now,
over.
Okay, let me spring to the rescue here. Well, maybe I should just outsource this all to the crowd. Let me ask one question before, just to get the methodology straight here. Is there a broad way to characterize the difference between internet polling and traditional, whatever else you want to call what people do?
Well, we use the same statistical techniques. We do the same modeling of populations. But obviously we have some advantages and some disadvantages. Not everybody's on the internet, although nowadays...
so you send, what do you send people, emails? How does it work?
We proactively recruit people to our panel.
Okay.
We have a panel of over 2 million, about
2 million worldwide?
2 million people, half of them in America, about another quarter in the US, the UK, and the rest across Middle East and Europe. We have them registered. We know a huge amount. They get paid 50p a poll. It's not a lot, but it's a thank you. The important thing is that we've proactively recruited them. They haven't just come to us. We found them. And the second thing is that we pick up a huge amount of data about them. So every time they do a poll.
So it's not just the poll. You collect the other secondary, the kind of stuff people in this room use all the time.
Well, yes, we do a bit of that as well, but that's not what I meant. What I meant was every time they do a poll, it goes into our database. We enrich our model.
So if they say they're an 18-year-old girl and they're actually a 65-year-old man, you know.
Well, I wouldn't know that, but it's actually a very, it's an unlikely event.
Okay.
People often think people lie to pollsters. Given that we get things right all the time, it suggests that's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's, and then you what? You send them notifications?
We send them invitations.
You say, hey, we're asking a question, and do you want
to... That's right. We select a balanced sample from our panel. Our panel is obviously, as all the internet is, biased towards certain demographic groups. We have gone out to recruit people that are from other demographic groups, and then we bring them from the panel onto a particular survey, and that's...
So the principal difference would be that traditional pollsters would be calling these people on the phone or something, whereas you assemble a group and...
Yeah.
So you can be quicker, cheaper, faster, better.
All of those things, and of course we do know that people are more honest on the internet. We know that people can stop...
Now, even though no one knows you're a dog.
Pardon?
Even though no one on the internet knows that you're a dog, with a famous joke.
There's no value. You do a poll in order to give your opinion. There's no point in giving a false opinion or giving false information. And clearly they don't, because, as I say, we correctly predict. The other thing that's very important is people get a chance to think about a question. If you're asked by an interviewer a difficult question that you can't answer, you don't have the knowledge, on the internet, you can have a think about it, and you're more likely to say don't know if you don't know.
Okay.